Hello, everyone. My name is Ayomide Bello, and you're welcome to another episode of Let There Be Light. Let There Be Light is a thought leadership series brought to you by Akinwunmi and Busari, a corporate commercial law firm in Lagos, Nigeria. Let There Be Light series focuses on electricity sector in Nigeria. We talk about different things on this show, ranging from policies, laws, implementation of the Electricity Act, and trending issues as well. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Electricity Act 2023 and how states have been able to develop their electricity markets. On today's episode, we have no other than Engineer Stephen Bolawole, FNSC. He is a power sector expert with over 30 years experience. He's currently the state coordinator of OSEB. OSEB is the Ondo State Electricity Regulatory Bureau. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ayomide, for inviting me.
Thank you so much. So we'll just get right into it. The Electricity Act 2023, signed into law by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It now gives states the authority to generate their own power, basically to deal in electricity. How has the act impacted state activities with Ondo State as a particular focus?
Well, thank you so much. Electricity Act 2023 was signed in the year 2023, I think around March 17 or thereabouts. But Ondo State has taken the bull by the horn since 2020, first of its kind in Nigeria, by passing into law the Ondo State Electric Power Sector Law 2020. That law was out then to solve the problems that affect basically every citizen in Nigeria, and that is the problem of epileptic supply of electricity. And as at that time, in Ondo State, we have 3 senatorial districts. We have the Ondo South, Ondo Central, and the Ondo North. In Ondo State, 2 out of the 3 senatorial districts were cut off from the national grid. And it was so difficult then because people believe that it is a government light, in quote, the popular word, Ino Ijoba. So as a result, nobody was ready to actually tackle, government Ijoba, because nobody fight the government and win. So that was the slogan. So the state government, through the Office of Energy then, sat down and began to see what can we do to rescue our people from all of this. And then we look into the Constitution. And for the first time, I think, in the history of Nigeria, we let people know that electricity is on the concurrent legislative list, meaning that the state can legislate on it, the federal also can legislate on it. And that was what brought about the Ondo State Electric Power Sector Law. It was the last law signed by the then governor in year 2023, I think around December. And that particular law was hinged on 2 pivots. Of course, there was this clause in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as far as electricity is concerned, as at that time. The clause stated that the state can only legislate in areas not covered by national grid. So in order to actually make the law also potent in area covered by national grid, which were, as at that time, covered by the disco. Of course, the disco, the way they dance their disco as at that time. So in order to make the law also cover that area, we also invoke the power of the state assembly to legislate on the rights of their constituents. That is, we now call that one consumer protection side of the law, meaning that the state can also talk in terms of estimated billing, outrageous billing, where people are being cheated in areas covered by national grid, so that we can also work there. Then in areas not covered by national grid, that the law specifically expressly give us the power, we're able to begin to bring in mini grid provider and so on. So in the law, we also make it potent, and it is still potent till today, but for the first time in any law passed in Nigeria, we're able to define the national grid. We're able to define the national grid. For example, in Ondo South, for over 15 years, they don't have electricity. Should we say that despite the fact that we have wires, we have cables, we have transformers there, can we say that that place is national grid? No. We define in our law that areas that has enjoy electricity for the upward time of maybe 15 years and has been cut off, and now for an upward of 3 years has not been enjoying electricity, that place is called an unserved area and area not covered by national grid. So by the law. So what the state can do in that respect will mean that the state will now take over the place and bring in investor to come and do electricity there. So when Electricity Act now came on board in year 2023, we now got that full power that, okay, the clause has been removed now. We can now legislate in areas covered by national grid. So as a result of that, the electricity market was created. Of course, you know, when you pass your law, the Electricity Act says you can now write the NEC and tell them you have sanctioned your electricity market. So as a result of that, you are now matured to legislate or to regulate your electricity market. And that was what we did. We were the first to do that. We were the first to do that in Nigeria. And by the grace of God, in April, our first letter came, April 22nd, precisely. Of course, you know, we need to wait for like 6 months before we can have the full control. And by October 22nd, 2023, we were given the full control through NEC, and every players in the electricity market, either two that were licensed by NEC, those licenses were sent to us. So we are fully on ground, and by the grace of God, we are doing well. Thank you.
That's very, very interesting. And it's something that should be very well recognized, because Ondo State, from what you have said, has been proactive, was proactive, and it basically had the best interest of people living in Ondo in mind. So that's a thumbs up for Ondo State. But I want to ask about the operational transition. So regulatory wise, NEC has now given, Ondo State the power to make their laws. But what about the operational transition? How has that been in terms of distribution companies?
Thank you so much. Immediately we started the work, the first thing that was done was to look at the law. What does the law say about the agency that were in charge of electricity in Ondo State before? So these agencies were strengthened, like giving them new roles that is now in vogue according to the law. So the Ondo State Electricity Regulatory Bureau, as created by the law, was structured and to take the bull by the horn to start doing what we call the licensing. So we now have the licensing regime for the Ondo State Electricity Regulatory Bureau. And the Electricity Act also says that the distribution company, the successor distribution company that was in Ondo State before, that is the Benin Electricity Distribution Company, that was either to license by NEC, that as a matter of urgency, that DISCO will need to set up a subsidiary company. So, and immediately that happened, they set up a subsidiary company, and we immediately licensed that subsidiary company to take over the responsibility of electricity within Ondo State. And as a result of that, a lot of players started coming in, and I want to assure you that by the grace of God, Ondo State was the first to license an independent electricity distribution network at the subnational in Nigeria. So we decided to do that, and we have also licensed a whole number of generation company, off-grid generation company in Ondo State. And IEDN, franchising, all of that are in place. We have done about 5 hearings, license hearing for them, and we are good to go.
That's interesting. Ondo State seems to be taking first position. They're setting the pace. Very interesting.
We are silent, Ashiva.
That's great.
Hello everyone, welcome to the special edition of Let There Be Light Fireside Chat. As we all know, the electricity sector has evolved with the emergence of the Electricity Act 2023. Different states have been given regulatory control over their electricity market. So, in this special edition, we'll be spotlighting commissioners, coordinators of different states and having interviews with them on how they have been driving these changes. So, You do not want to miss any of the sessions. It promises to be enlightening, so stay tuned.
Thank you so much, sir, for your explanation. It seems like Ondo State is leading the pack. Ondo State is setting the pace. As the state coordinator and seeing as Ondo State electricity market is ripe, what should a company or an investor or a player, industry player, what should they look out for? What do they need to show, to come into that market as a player?
Thank you. Like I said, we have received a number of intent from investors to come into the generation, transmission, distribution, and trading in Ondo State. And what they do is to show us a letter of intent or an expression of interest. And the next thing will be, within 24 hours, teams of experts will respond to them. And having responded to them, we want them to come and tell us what they can do. Most of the time, we have these guys from overseas. And what we do is to conduct a virtual presentation for them. And having listening to them, and we are sure that they have the capacity to do what they are saying they want to do, we help them to obtain the application form. And in the application form, there are some checklists that they need to do. And after that, they submit that to us with the attachment of the checklist. They can do that online. They can also come physically. And after that, the next one will be due to do a public hearing of their license. That's what we have been doing.
Oh, that's interesting. How long does this process take?
Well, the process does not take long. We've had people that got their license within 2 weeks. We have people that have gotten their license within 1 month. So it depends on the company readiness to supply all the necessary requirements.
So, sir, with the new influx of investors and private individuals or companies coming into the market, how does OSEB ensure fair competition? How do they intend to ensure that?
Let me explain it this way. In Ondo State presently, we have an existing disco that is working there that has been licensed by us. We also have some IEDN that have been licensed by us. We also have some generation company that have been licensed by us. Now, this license or their licenses stated the rules, the regulations, the boundary that everybody will need to do. So we already have delineation for them, delineation of area, geographical boundary where they will need to work. So, and the rules and regulation, the terms and conditions that will make them work is already there. So there is fair competition among them. And then the issue of the affordability to the consumers. Of course, the consumers, I told you that what we get from the national grid is in the neighborhood of 35 megawatts, sometimes 25 megawatts. And the demand is in the neighborhood of 900 plus megawatt. So the consumer, they are already used to the tariff of diesel and petrol. The tariff of diesel is in the neighborhood of, I think, 967 naira per kilowatt hour, and that of petrol is around 530 something naira per kilowatt hour. So people like that are now the prevalent tariff that people have submitted to us, the IEDN, including the subco, is the highest is around 209 naira per kilowatt hour. So you can imagine that if people see that and they are so sure that they will have supply, they will see that as affordable. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, so now that Ondo State has its own, should I say, independent authority, right? How will they ensure that there is no clash or there's coordination between the authority that NERC has and the one that the state has?
The Electricity Act has stated that clearly. The Electricity Act has divided that boundary. NERC is interstate, and the SECs, the State Electricity Regulatory Commission of Bureaus, are within. So there is no clash of interest. We maintain our boundary, NERC maintains our boundary.
Hello everyone, welcome to this special edition of Let There Be Light Fireside Chat. As we all know, the electricity sector has evolved with the emergence of the Electricity Act 2023. Different states have been given regulatory control over their electricity market. So, in this special edition, we'll be spotlighting commissioners, coordinators of different states and having interviews with them on how they have been driving these changes. So, you do not want to miss any of the sessions. It promises to be enlightening, so stay tuned.
If you've been with us or if you're just joining us, we have in the studio today Engineer Stephen Bolawole, FNSE. He's the State Coordinator of OSEB, Ondo State Electricity Bureau. He has told us how Ondo State is a pace setter, been proactive, and has a ripe market for the electricity market. So, sir, how is OSEB or how is Ondo State attracting investors to the electricity market? And what is the incentives in place? Is it easy to enter? What are like the entry barriers? What are the incentives that the Ondo State government has put in place?
One of the first things that happened in Ondo State is our law, the electricity law. It's so robust that, I started by saying that law came on board to solve our problem. So it's not like an imported law. So, one of the problems with policy in some settings is that they are borrowed policy. It's not like an adage of a borrowed cap. So somebody saw a cap in Lagos for somebody in Akure. There's no way it will fit in perfectly. So our law suits our purpose. And if you look at Ondo State has this peculiarity. We have a lot of potentials that should be developed. So we make our law robust and to allow investor-friendly environment. That's what we did in our law. And one of the good things that I want to mention here, that I also want other states to showcase so that they can also attract investors like us, is the open access regulation or open access policy. So this open access policy, of course, you know that in different states, you already have DISCO operating there, and hitherto, they refer to that as their franchise area, meaning that they have some investment on ground. And most of the time, the DISCO will not allow other investors to use those network. But in Ondo State, we have what we call open access regulation, meaning that the DISCOs cannot disallow will-be investor to use those networks. So the law is already there. So any investor that sees that will know that his investment is already protected, that what he's coming to do will prosper. But if that is not in place, the fear of the DISCO will be the beginning of wisdom. So we have a lot of them that are coming, knowing fully well that their investment is protected even before they start. So this is one of the key areas that I even want other people to borrow from Ondo State. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. We had a previous guest and then mentioned that attracting foreign investment has been a challenge because somehow the distribution companies are not exactly profitable yet. Do you think that Ondo State has faced any of those challenges, seeing as, Ondo State has probably played in this area prior to the implementation of the Act or prior to 2023? So do you think that distribution companies, investors can confidently say, or the states can confidently assure investors that you will be profitable? We do not have those challenges here. There are no losses, there's no theft, there's no vandalism, your investments are safe in Ondo State.
One of the first things we did was for the first time, I know NEC is copying that already, the first time to do a law that will protect the investor and the consumer. It was not like that before our law. So, to attract investment into Ondo State, the first thing we did after that was to make electricity a product in Ondo State. So, if electricity is a product, it is now a willing buyer and willing seller arrangement. And if that happens, it means that the government influence in the electricity market will be minimal or not even existing at all, because it's a matter between you and the person that want to buy from you. So you are allowed. That is why it is called an independent market. So now, once we have that market, the next thing the government will do now is to protect the market. Protection now, protecting the investment and the investors and the consumer. How? The issue of electricity theft. The first thing we did was to make electricity theft a criminal offense. If you steal energy, you go to jail.
But that has always been a criminal offense.
In Ondo State.
It has always been a criminal offense.
But I have not seen a place where it has been enforced. But we are enforcing our own.
Okay.
We are enforcing our own. I remember I was in a panel somewhere and I mentioned it, and the white people, the investor there, they will say, wow, so that happened. So
what's the minimum punishment for
6 months imprisonment?
And people have been convicted
option of fine.
Without option of fine.
Yes, and we have been doing that. We have a dedicated enforcement department for that goes out and see whether you bypass meter or you. Well, let me tell you, the recent one now is because for the first time in Nigeria, Ondo State is doing more what we call mass metering. We make sure that meters are available. So immediately we discovered that meters are available. You want to buy meter, you get it within 24 hours. What we did next was to now at law that if you don't have meter, you cannot use electricity in Ondo State. So that is also to attract investors, so that when you see that if you are selling your energy, you are so sure that your profit and your costs are safe. You can get your collection easily. So that's what we do. So in Ondo State today, investment thrive because government is ready to enforce any irregularity in the market.
That's interesting. But I want to, so I hear you, and I've taken everything that you have said as what exactly is happening. But I do not live in Ondo State at the moment. I live in Lagos State. And I know that if you apply for meter in Lagos State, before you get it, you would have, it's a Herculean task, you know. But you mentioned 24 hours. So I want to clarify if it's actually that short a time to actually get your meters.
Let me tell you, in Ondo State, you mentioned somewhere, but don't let me. In Ondo State, our meter is, the policy is the state policy. It is not the one sold by the disco. So in other areas, they are the ones sold by the disco. So you can expect that the timeline will be more. But this one is how to solve the problem of one, energy theft and estimated billing. Do you see now? So energy theft on the side of the investor, estimated billing on the side of the consumer. So it's a two-pronged approach. So, and that is why we said the timeline should not be more than 24 hours. And let me also tell you that the meter in Ondo State is the cheapest in Nigeria as we speak, because the government also makes sure that they subsidize.
How cheap is it?
Don't let me mention that.
Okay, let's just go to another thing. So what I'm thinking of, for me, I've never seen, except for like now that you have mentioned it, electricity as a product in Ondo State. What I've known Ondo State for is cocoa farming, you know, all of those things. But I see how, you know, with power generation, with power being available, you know, it would foster industrialization and other things. So I wanted to ask if there's like some sort of like synergy between growth and development in Ondo State. Now, taking it beyond the scope of just electricity, how do you think that the impact of OSEB has affected other economies, so to speak, in Ondo State?
Thank you so much. In year 2020, the law was passed, and in year 2021, we started feeling the impact. Now, there is a place called Alaile Foshon in Ondo State that has never enjoyed electricity before year 2020. And since year 2021, an investor went there and gave them off-grid electricity. In that place, since then, they have been enjoying 24 hours electricity.
24 hours.
On solar, 24
And
hours
it is not an urban area.
Now, I said solar.
Okay, so
I know many people will be thinking solar. We have people that used to, welders, fabricators that used diesel generators there before the intervention of that investor. Majority of them sold their generators to the people living in the urban center. You understand? Meaning that they are enjoying it. And we also have places like that I begin to mention. If I begin to mention, I can mention like 100 mini-grid sites across Ondo State that, as we speak today, they enjoy 24-hour electricity. So without even talking about the impact on the economies, you already know the answer. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We've had an enlightening conversation so far. It's great to see that Ondo State is teaching us the path to follow.
Yes.
So you've mentioned that, there are licenses now given to discos, new entrants into the market. What should the people expect now from discos, from other sector players?
Thank you so much. The successor disco used to be with NEC, but now the subsidiary disco has been licensed by OSAB, Ondo State Electricity Regulatory Bureau. The licensing regime and the regulatory regime brings the regulator closer to the grassroots, to the consumer, and to the disco. So you can expect that. Of course, you don't know Ondo State much. Somebody in Alaile for sure, that will have the problem of outrageous billing. And the NEC regulations means that that person will need to communicate NEC. So before that person will move from Alaile function to Akure, and from Akure to Abuja, you know the distance. But now, you just need to walk to Alagbaka, or you just decide to press the button of a consumer complaint unit, fully automated, and people respond to you. And that is what has been happening. So now, disco are more responsive to issues. For example, I know something happened around December, and immediately it happened within 24 hours, we corrected it because people knew that there was a place they can actually channel their distance to within a limited time. And we handle it within 24 hours. So that has not been happening before. So the disco are more responsive now. And going forward, Electricity Act also mandate the state, the subnational regulator now to decide the end-use tariff. So the end-use tariff now that we want to adopt in Ondo State is the cost-reflective tariff. This one will bring the disco on their toes because from all indication, there's not going to be a subsidy again. So, and if there's not going to be subsidy, then it will make the disco be alive to their responsibility because there's no free money anywhere any longer.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much. I've been enjoying myself on today's episode. It's been very enlightening. It looks like Ondo State might be the next best thing after nowhere else. Okay, let's talk about renewable energy initiatives. Can you elaborate on what the state is doing? What is it promoting to promote renewable energy sources in Ondo State? And how do you envision these initiatives would impact local energy landscape?
Let me start with the policy. The policy of Ondo State presently is 70% conventional energy and 30% renewable energy. So, and from the technical point of view, you know that renewable integration into the power system will also bring down the ATC and C losses, to also reduce losses. So we are embracing that, and we want to thank God that people, the investors, have shown interest in Ondo State to do renewable stuffs in every nook and cranny of Ondo State. Although we have not gotten there yet, but we are still hoping that things will improve.
What steps is the Bureau taking to promote consumer awareness, engagement? How much of power did consumer have in decision making?
Thank you so much. Let me start from the last one. The power the consumers have in decision making. The procedure, business rule for doing regulation basically means that for you to get a license in Ondo State, after some series of a checklist, you need to publish in the new national daily and the state daily, so that people can actually see that you are coming to their domain to do what. And then after that, there will be a stakeholder engagement whereby we invite the communities, the stakeholder in the market for you to come and showcase what you have for them. Then for the consumer awareness, we have a department called Consumer Affairs Department. In that particular department, we have a unit that is called Consumer Education. So this consumer education will be going on here, moving from towns to create awareness. I remember last December, Mr. Governor mandated us to go to Igbokoda to go and enlighten them on the usage of electricity and what they need to do to get meter, and to also inform them that it's not a business as usual, that it is no longer iná ìjọba. In fact, in his word, he said, èmi kọ́ ni mo fún yín níná, I am not the one that gave you electricity, so you have the right to pay what you are consuming. So these are some of the things we have been doing, but we know we still have a lot of gap to cover in that area.
I think to summarize what you have said so far is that Ondo State is proactive, Ondo State is consumer-centric, and Ondo State is a good place for investors to come and invest.
Yes.
Let's talk about future plans.
Well, our future plan,
long-term, short-term future plans,
is to make Ondo State a place that will be called an industrial state. Somebody told me sometimes, and I also say it here, that then the fund that they used to build the cocoa house was gotten in Ondo State. So if that fund was gotten from Ondo State, then we are hoping that Ondo State is a place that, if we can get it right in terms of electricity access to electricity, then we can always compete with all the other industrialized states. So our future plan, that's our future plan. And our immediate plan is to see how we can reduce the aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses in Ondo State. And what we are doing presently is to make sure that all industry that are generating inductive loads, of course, inductive loads by technical terms, we make the technical loss high. So what we are doing now is to make a regulation that will make them to install capacitor banks that will reduce those losses, because they are generating those losses, and even the consumer are also partaking in also experiencing that losses that they are generating, and they are paying more at the expense of them. So if they put that, we know that overall the aggregate technical losses will come down. Then the tariff in Ondo State will also come down, and will also be more affordable for people. So those are the things we are doing.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll usually ask guests that come on this show to describe to describe the Electricity Act in one word. We've had, previous guests say game changing. One said, Engineer Fadebi mentioned that it's explosive, So while I want to ask you that question, I'm also noting the fact that Ondo State has been setting the pace even before the Electricity Act of 2023. So your questions will be in two folds. Describe the Electricity Act 2023 in one word, and also describe the electricity market in Ondo State, one word.
Electricity market in Ondo State is growing, and the Electricity Act, before I describe in one word, the Electricity Act, I see for the first time, and I think people need to hear this. Electricity Act is out to sanction, to validate the law of Ondo State. I don't know of other states, but I know that of Ondo State, because I've never seen a law passed by the National Assembly and immediately after the preface went straight to say that nothing in this act shall invalidate any law passed by Ondo State House of Assembly in the area of generation, transmission, distribution. He mentioned it. So meaning that our law is potent, and I know Electricity Act also is being careful of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So in one word, Electricity Act is fantastic.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today in the studio. I have fantastically enjoyed myself. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and also engage us on today's episode. Leave your comments in the comment section. And till next episode, I remain Ayomide Bello.
Hello everyone, welcome to the special edition of Let There Be Light Fireside Chat. As we all know, the electricity sector has evolved with the emergence of the Electricity Act 2023. Different states have been given regulatory control over their electricity market. So, in this special edition, we'll be spotlighting commissioners, coordinators of different states and having interviews with them on how they have been driving these changes. So, you do not want to miss any of the sessions. It promises to be enlightening, so stay tuned.